ખંડન ભાવ रान भगत शरण तजी जाति कुल मान संपद तव श्रीपद भाव गोष्पद वारी यथा प्रेम पान शमं दर्शन प्रेम पान शमं दर्शन जग जन दुख संपद तव श्रीपद भाव गोष्पद वारी यथा प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन जग जन दुख जाय नमो नमो प्रभु भक्तमनाथित नमो नमो प्रभु भक्तमनाथित मन वचनैका धार प्रभु मन वचनैका धार ज्योतिर ज्योति उज्जवल हृदय कंदर ज्योतिर ज्योति उज्जवल हृदय कंदर तुमि तम भंजन हार प्रभु तुमि तम भंजन हार नमो नमो प्रभु वाक्यमनाथित नमो नमो प्रभु वाक्यमनाथित मनो वचनैका धार प्रभु मनो वचनैका धार ज्योतिर ज्योति उज्जवल हृदय कंदर ज्योतिर ज्योति उज्जवल हृदय कंदर तुमि तम भंजन हार प्रभु तुमि तम भंजन हार धध लंग रंग भंग बाजे अंग संग मृदंग धध लंग रंग भंग बाजे अंग संग मृदंग गाइছে ছন্দ ভক্ত বৃন্দ আরতি তোমার গাইছে ছন্দ ভক্ত বৃন্দ আরতি তোমার জয় জয় আরতি তোমার হর হর আরতি তোমার শিব শিব আরতি তোমার খান দান ভাব বন্ধন জগ বন্দন বন্দে তোমায় जय श्री गुरु महाराज जी की जय। ओम ह्रीं ऋतं त्वमचलो गुणजित् गुणेद्यः नाक्तं दिवं सकरुणं तव पाद पद्मं मोहं कषं बहुकृतं न भजे यतोऽहं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो भक्तिर्भगश्च भजनं भवभेदकारीं गच्छन्तयलं सुविपुलं गमनाय तत्त्वं वक्त्रोद्धृतोऽपि हृदये न मे भाति किञ्चित् तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो तेजस्तरन्ति तरसां त्वयि तृप्त तृष्णां रागे कृते ऋतपथे त्वयि राम कृष्णे मर्त्यामृतं तव पदं मरणोर्मि नाशं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो कृत्यं करोति कलुषं कुहकान्तकारी शान्तं शिवं सुविमलं तव नाम नाथ यस्मादहं तु अशरणो जगदेकगम्यं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्म स्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। ॐ नमो श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमो श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमो श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ सर्वमङ्गल मङ्गले शिवे सर्वार्थ साधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके गौरी नारायणी नमोस्तुते। सृष्टिस्थिति विनाशानां शक्ति भूते सर्वस्य Sanatani Guna Sraye Guna Maya Narayani Namostute Gato Dinarto Paritrana Parayane Sarvas Sharti Hare Devi Narayani Namostute Jayona Rayani Namostute Jayona Rayani Namostute Jayona Rayani Namostute Jayona Rayani Namostute. जय महामाई की जय जय भगवान श्री रामकृष्ण देव की जय जय स्वामी जी महाराज जी की जय।
Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Sure Satchit Sukhaswarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So we were discussing this lecture, Absolute and the Manifestation. And the last couple of turns, we had been describing how Vivekananda identifies the Advaitic doctrine of Maya with this more Western philosophical concept of space-time and causation, and says basically we are referring to the same thing. It was pointed out by somebody who listens to these things on YouTube that we had missed a paragraph. It's not quite a paragraph, it's actually a few lines. The point is that we hadn't read it out, but we had discussed the issue. But so I'll just go back a little bit and read that, and then we'll go forward. Okay. Now the question is, what are time, space, and causation? Advaita means non-duality. There are no two, but one. Yet we see that here is a proposition that the Absolute is manifesting itself as many through the veil of time, space, and causation. Therefore, it seems that here are two. The Absolute and Maya. And parenthetically, next to Maya, he says, the sum total of time, space, and causation. In this particular lecture, Vivekananda unambiguously identifies Maya with precisely this time, space, and causation. So if the doctrine of Maya seems abstruse and obscure, just think time, space, and causation. It seems apparently very convincing that there are two. To this, the Advaitist replies that it cannot be called two. To have two, we must have two absolute independent existences which cannot be caused. In the first place, time, space, and causation cannot be said to be independent existences. Time is entirely a dependent existence. It changes with every change of our mind. Sometimes in dream, one imagines that one has lived several years. At other times, several months were passed as 1 second. So time is entirely dependent on our state of mind. Secondly, the idea of time vanishes altogether sometimes. So, with space. We cannot know what space is, yet it is there, indefinable, and cannot exist separate from anything else. So, with causation. And then he went on elaborating this particular theme and saying, look, this is exactly what Maya is about. There are two points here that Vivekananda raises. One, which we have discussed at some length, and the other, which is, so basically there's a certain larger, more cosmic or more universal aspect, and there's also the individual aspect. The larger, more cosmic aspect is what he refers to as time, space, and causation. And he asks the question, now is there this absolute and this second thing that we are calling space, time, and causation? Are these two different entities? And he goes on to explain that it is not reasonable to call these two different things, basically because this notion of space-time and causation is something that is dependent. It's a dependent reality. It is not something that is independent of other individual existences. What then? See, this kind of a discussion might seem rather abstruse and abstract, but is it really? Who would say that the perception of time is something that is not real, but rather something abstract? We perceive the flow of time every moment of our lives, yet we do not latch on to it. As soon as we see a sequence of events occurring, the spacing, the relation between those two events is necessarily in the framework of time. The structure that our minds put forward in order to understand the spacing between events is this thing that we call time. Yet, as soon as we try to catch hold of that spacing between events, it slips through our fingers. At one level, as soon as we are not looking at time too carefully, it is there with us all the time. But as soon as we focus our attention on it and ask, what really is this time? It seems to vanish. It does not yield to our investigation. Why? And here, the probing, the answer to all these questions is basically hidden in the structure of our mind itself. Our minds are accustomed to flitting from one thing to the other. At this moment, it is thinking of one thing, then it starts running off in a tangential direction and associates with some other object. One set of waves comes to the mind, leaves, and a second set comes along. This spacing between mental events is what gives rise to this subjective notion of time. And this is the second point Vivekananda raises here. There is an objective, larger notion of time, an abstract notion of time, space, and causation, in and through which we grasp all phenomena in the world. On the other hand, there is a subjective notion which comes from mental events. And the spacing between mental events is what gives rise to the subjective notion, the individual notion of time. Suppose a person goes into a coma and stays in that coma for some time. When that person comes out of coma, will he or she have any idea as to whether he or she was in coma for 1 hour or 1 day, 1 hour? So suppose there's a clock next to the person's bed. And the hands of the watch or clock have moved by, say, 1 hour. After coming out, will that person be able to say that, oh, I was in coma for 1 hour, or 1 day, 1 hour, or 2 days, 1 hour, or 1 year, 1 hour. Nothing. It's basically a state where one knew nothing. This is enough to show that the notion of time does vanish in one's subjective experience given various circumstances. We do not need to go to such extremes as a coma, but every night, this is a part and parcel of our day-to-day experience. Nothing mystical, nothing mysterious, nothing out of the ordinary. Each one of us who has fallen off to sleep has had that experience. When we come out of sleep, deep sleep, without any dreams, we have no idea how long we have slept. Why? Because during sleep, there were no mental waves. There were no thoughts. So this sense of time, which is inseparably intertwined with various mental states that come and go, has vanished basically because the mind has become quiescent. The mind has gone to sleep. And that mind's going to sleep is synonymous with time being the subjective time being put to sleep. So this subjective notion, Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta particularly makes this difference between the cosmic aspect where it's called Maya and the individual aspect where it's called Avidya. These are just words. They are really referring to something which is common sense, something which is part and parcel of our day-to-day existence. This is the starting point, the raw data, which we analyze to extract truth. So subjectively, the notion of time does vanish. What about space? Were we aware of our bodies in deep sleep? No. Even in dreams, there are these mental images that come up, and we have identified with a certain dream body, so to speak, which we call I. And in the dream, even after, suppose there's this famous example that is given by Shankaracharya in one of his bhashyas at some point, saying that, this is in the Mandukya Karika, Mandukya Upanishad Karika. Shankara says, see, a person after having a full meal goes to sleep and dreams that he is famished and has not had solid food for a month. So something that happens in the dream is completely inconsonant with what has happened before. There is a mismatch between these, which means that the notion of space that we have in dreams and the notion of space that we have while waking and moving around are quite different, which means that this notion of space, subjective notion of space, has nothing absolute about it. So also causation. See, in dreams, sometimes a person imagines that he or she is flying. Oh, if they'll jump off from some cliff, please don't try it in practice. If there's somebody jumps off from a cliff and then spreads his or her arms out and then flies in space. In the dream, it does not seem particularly inconsistent. The law of gravity, so to speak, has ceased to apply in this collection of mental events. So just a jumping off a dream cliff is enough for the dream body to fly in space. So the notion of what will cause what? We know in waking state, I jump off a cliff, I'm going to fall down and get crushed and die. So one doesn't do it in waking state. But in the dream state, it's fine. So what is a causal sequence of events is also at variance while we are dreaming and while we are awake. So these notions, these mental notions, first, what is the point of this particular paragraph? One starts with what we in our waking state assume to be an absolute time, an absolute space, an absolute notion of causation. And we do not challenge this notion that we have in ourselves that these are unchanging realities. But hidden in our experience itself, we don't have to go to a mountaintop. We do not have to seek some highly evolved particular individual to seek this out. Just hunt in your own experience. This notion of absolute time, space, and causation with which we interpret our external world itself vanishes at times. Itself goes for a vacation, and a different notion of time, space, and causation comes into being. And then finally, in deep sleep, this notion of time, space, and causation simply vanishes. Simply vanishes. So it could be of one kind. In the waking state, it could be of a different kind in a dream state, and it could simply vanish in deep sleep. And so how does one describe this time, space, and causation? And we had mentioned this shloka from Vivek Chudamani last time. So this is a summary of what we had not quite read, but we had discussed last time, and was there in this particular lecture. So before going further ahead, what I'd like to do is bring you back to a certain shloka from the Vivek Chudamani by Shankaracharya again, where he gives a certain account of the mysterious nature of this space, time, and causation. And in the Vedanta literature, this is what is called Maya. And he says, Sannapya sanyahi ubhayatmikano bhinnapya bhinnapi ubhayatmikano Sangyahyananga hi ubhayatmikano mahadbhuta anirvachaniya rupa. He is pitching opposite poles of our experience, one against the other, and then saying that this, what we call space, time, and causation, is neither this nor that. Sat na api asat na. You can neither say that it is, nor can you say that it is not. You cannot say it is different. Bhinna api, abhinna api, ubhayatmika na. So it is not separate, nor is it inseparable, nor is it partly separable, partly inseparable. Yeah? All our logical faculties which deal with things at these various antipodes, we say that something is, or we say that something is not, or we say that something is in between. This idea of time, space, and causation, which is this universal construct without which we cannot comprehend anything, without which there is no seeing, no feeling, no hearing, no knowing. But if you try to catch hold of this framework itself, you can neither say that it is, nor can you say that it is not, nor can you say that it partly is or partly is not, nor can you say that it is neither is nor is not. Yeah? So there are these four kinds of logical alternatives. This part is actually borrowed from a Buddhist system of philosophy where it's called Chatushkoti. This was brought up by this great Buddhist philosopher called Nagarjuna, who in a way is the founder of Madhyamaka Buddhism, with which Advaita Vedanta has remarkable parallels. And finally, what is the conclusion? He says, Mahadbhuta Anirvachaniya Rupa. Mahadbhuta. It's a great wonder. Anirvachaniya. You cannot formulate it in terms of clear concepts or words. That's the only thing that one can say about it. But it's not something that you should not take this to mean that, oh, I've just give up describing it. No. It is only after the mind has tried its level best to penetrate into the heart of the matter and has failed. After the full effort, when the mind gives up, says, oh, what a great wonder. This, in a certain sense, taps into two great faculties that the human mind has. First, a sense of wonderment or awe. We look around and see this great universe, this huge world around us, and very rarely, occasionally, our mind wakes up to this fact that this world is a wonder. Why does it even exist? Why is there this great diversity around us? And the mind just dissolves into this wonder. I think I'd mentioned that at some place Einstein remarks that the sense of wonderment is perhaps the noblest and greatest emotion that human beings have. But this sense of wonderment, in the Kathamrita, Sri Ramakrishna says, Eki, Eki. Yeah? That's how this first reaction, the reaction to wonder is. I mean, so the human reaction is, what is this? Eki means, what is this? What is this? What is this? Yeah? And tap that with this other, now with this Vedantic statement. Instead of what is this? What is this? Just change a couple of words there. What next? What next? So on the one hand, you have wonder. On the other, you have again another great human faculty. The faculty to pursue truth above everything else. This second faculty is what gives rise to enquiry, seeking of the truth. So the first wonder, mystery, which somehow makes this mind react with this, oh, there's this great thing around us, and the individual mind somehow loses itself in that grandeur, in that wonder which this world is. And then it starts the second thing, this atakkim, matakkim, or what next, is inside all this wondrous stuff which I do not comprehend, which I do not understand. What is the truth? In other words, the mind is not satisfied with just the wonder, but wants to seek out in the midst of that wonder what the truth is. This is what gives rise to all sciences, all enquiry, all medical, all things that one needs when one falls ill, or all this electricity around us. Product of human enquiry. The tiger in the forest or the elephant in the grasslands does not have the capacity to enquire into these electric forces and tap these forces for its own good. We as human beings have done it. It's because of this, coupled with this sense of wonder, huge streaks of lightning streaking through the sky during thunderstorms evokes wonder, evokes awe. But then there's a Benjamin Franklin who decides to tap that and tries to understand what it is about. What is the truth in that streak of lightning? It is these two faculties, wonder and this desire for truth, that lead to all these deeper inquiries. Here, this Maya is basically being described as this wondrous thing. But the mind does not stop there. It needs to find, behind all this wonder, what is the truth. And this inquiry into the truth is what qualifies, is what can be described as this inquiry into the self. This is what Jnana Yoga is about. Not stopping at that sense of wonder, but asking, what is the truth in all this that overawes us? What is the truth in all this stuff that looks so wondrous? The faculty of inquiry, atakkim, what next, what next? What is the truth in all this? What is the truth in all this? That leads us beyond this domain of Maya into the domain of truth. Beyond the domain of space, time and causation into the domain of truth. See, the discovery of a law itself comes in a flash. See, this is not something that only people who discover various facts come up with. We all have this faculty to a greater and lesser extent. We are looking at something in the dark and it seems obscure. There's a certain lack of clarity. The mind is lost in a mixture of what is this thing and a certain wonderment. A mystical twilight, as Vivekananda calls it elsewhere. And then slowly, with the mind being focused on it, that object in this semi-darkness starts revealing its inner qualities, and then finally the mind is satisfied. Oh, this is only such and such. This is when the mind has calmed down has moved from this sense of wonderment towards this clear idea that this has such and such a property, and that's called the mind focusing on the truth. Now take the same thing and generalize it to the highest possible extent, essentially asking, what is this world around us? What is this entire universe that impinges on our senses? And then start going to its foundation. And once we start this journey, we find at a certain stage that all these individual phenomena, all these individual objects that we see around us, they impinge on us, they impinge on our subjective consciousness through the medium of this general framework called time, space, and causation. In a different place, again Shankara says, Avyakta namni paramesha shakti anadya vidya trigunatmika para karyanumeya sudhyaiva maya yaya jagat sarvam idam prasuyate. He's describing Maya again, but now in its more conscious form. See, when we try to separate this and describe it as something outside, we call it Maya. But then there is a more devotional way of looking at this same thing where we say this Maya, Vedanta says Maya avachinna chaitanya. So when consciousness is qualified by this twilight, then it's this pure wonder. Yeah? That is called Ishvara in Vedanta. Yeah? Or Shakti in various other traditions. Which is why that too See, our minds and our ways of understanding are part and parcel of that. Which is why it's so difficult to sift out the consciousness, pure consciousness, out of this framework. In order to perceive something, it's a power of consciousness that comes into being, so to speak. And here is this projection of these notions of time, space, and causation, and through that we grasp reality. Which is why he says, but it's avyakta. It's not clear, it's not manifest in front of our perception, our buddhi, our intelligence. Avyakta namni, paramesha shakti. Same thing, he's describing Maya, but now as Maya Avachinna Chaitanya. Consciousness functioning through this framework of space-time and causation. Anadi avidya trigunatmika para, made of all these gunas. Yeah? Karya anumeya. It is understood only through its effects. Karya is effect here. Anumeya, to be inferred. Sudhiyaiva Maya. It's only through these wise people understand it only through the effect. Yaya jagat sarvam idam prasuyate. Through which this whole world comes into being. Prasuyate means is born. Two shlokas describing the same thing but taking slightly different points of view. In one, he describes this great wonder. And the other, he says, this great power through which this whole world comes into being, is born. But how do we catch hold of it? There is nothing, this is the point of this whole business is all right. So you start with this perception, this sense of wonderment, then start pursuing it to ask, what is the truth in all this? Where does it lead us? Where does it lead us? And what need we to do in terms of our subjective mental disciplining in order to probe the depths of this mystery and to come to the truth at the core of it? Again, two kinds of answers are given. And one of the oldest Upanishads, the Brihadaranyaka, there also this word Maya is used in what is called the Madhu Brahmana, part of the second chapter. I'll just read it out and I'll extract the exact bit that is relevant to us. Idam vaitat madhu dadhyan atharvano ashvibhyam uvacha tad etad rishi pashyan avochat rupam rupam pratirupo babhuva tadasya rupam pratichakshanaya. This is the crucial thing. Rupam rupam pratirupo babhuva tadasya rupam pratichakshanaya. Indro mayabhi pururupa iyate. Mayabhi pururupa iyate. Yukta hi asya haraya shata dasha iti. Mayabhi pururupa iyate. So this power through which it comes into being is called Maya here. Again, compare it with what Shankara had just described some time back. Avyakta namni paramesha shakti. So that's the same thing. Mayabhi pururupayate. Through this power called Maya. Well, that's not so important here. What's important is rupam rupam pratirupo babhuva. It's manifesting in and through all these multifarious forms. Rupa is form that we see around us. What is happening here? Try to seek the psychology of the person, the deep psychology of the person, the deep enquiry of the person who comes out with these words. Rupam rupam pratirupo bhavova. In and through this wondrous multifariousness, That mind is seeking this one truth which underlies all this variegated reality. This is the quality of mind it is supposed to encourage in us. Not stopping at this common sense reality of multifariousness, but really taking a step back and asking, oh, it's such a strange thing that I do perceive this and I do gain knowledge. This is something that none of us can deny. But what is it in us that makes us, that allows us to extract knowledge, extract truth from our day-to-day experience? I have no doubt that around me there is this light, there is a room. Our minds, consciously or unconsciously, spontaneously behaves as if it has found the truth about the world at this moment. And then takes a step back and then says, oh, I don't understand such and such. It keeps oscillating between this latching on to truth and the sense of wonderment. These are the two universal aspects of the mind which the Vedantic inquiry here taps into and tries to pursue those two faculties to the limit. And then he goes on, Brother Arnika, Ayam vai haraya, ayam vai dasha cha sahasrani bahuni cha anantani cha. Tad etad brahma purvam anaparam anantaram abhayam ayam atma brahma sarvanubhu iti anushasanam. See, first, in this little passage, these two ways of thinking about these deeper questions is given as a hint. First, rupam rupam pratirupo babhuva. All this manifest reality, everything, is a reflection of that consciousness, one. And then the next set of descriptions is via negation. Anaparam, anantaram, abhayam, ayamatma, brahma, sarvanubhu. This particular set of words, ayamatma, brahma, is referred to as one of the Mahavakyas. Ayam Atma Brahma. This consciousness, not something mystical, not something hidden, but this consciousness in and through which we perceive everything, this most immediate. In order to perceive this camera in front of me, to see this light, to be aware that this table is there, to read. In order to do any of this, first faculty that is required, the foundation of what is required, is consciousness. So this inquiry into this multivariousness, into this so-called everything, boils down to an inquiry into consciousness, that which provides the knowledge base for this framework of time, space, and causation, which is projected from that consciousness as a framework for grasping reality. How do we go about doing it? See, in some sense, there are these two things. The final answers are given on the, if you look at the world around, and there is this huge multifariousness, evokes a sense of wonder. Simultaneously, there is this evocation of this desire to know the truth behind all this. The faculty of inquiry comes into existence simultaneously. Wonderment and inquiry, obverse and reverse of the same faculty in the human mind. And then take up any of these, either of these or some mixture of these, pursued to the hilt. The conclusion, Ayam Atma Brahma. This that you were calling this wondrous everything, and this individual consciousness through which you grasped, are in essence the same. This is the culminating point of the inquiry. This is what Advaita is about. You start with this dualistic perception, but keep this tool of inquiry, viveka, discrimination, vivekananda. So it's this word viveka, analytic inquiry, subjectively, inward driven, culminates in this finding that this that we call this entire external world and this subjective consciousness are really the same thing. Either you inquire into the external world or you inquire into the subject. Any culminating point, necessarily it has to be subjective. It's not some culminating point, is not something that can happen outside. Where does the inquiry culminate? And that the finding from there comes up in this form. Rupam, rupam, pratirupa bhavova on the one hand, and ayamatma brahma on the other. Fair enough. Usually, all these Vedantic texts, Brahma Sutra Bhashya for instance, first tell you what is the conclusion they are going towards. Yeah? So the Siddhanta. And that's the Siddhanta that is being, the conclusion that is being told in a certain sense. See, there is this wondrous outside and there is this subjective consciousness trying to grasp this. And finally, what you will culminate, if there is a culmination, logically, it has to culminate in these two things merging into the same undivided reality. All right, very fine. But how do we proceed towards it? This is fine, and our logical faculty is to at least some extent satisfied with this as a potential conclusion. But then, as soon as we start looking around, this is not what appears to us. We feel no sense of wonder. We just take the world for granted on the one hand. And we don't try to, there's this huge amount of fake news going around all around us. And we don't inquire into it. We don't ask whether it's true or not. Yeah? Take it for granted. So there is neither this faculty of inquiry which we cultivate, nor this sense of wonder which impinges on us at every moment. So what are we going to do? How are we going to cultivate something which leads us towards this? So that part is given, so various practices are given. And the most useful one, see, finally, it's not something that's going to be something piecemeal. It's supposed to be a way of life, a worldview, which we carry with us all the time. And what is it that we are seeking then? Something that starts with this time, space, and causation and asks, what is the truth in all this? And we take a hint from this statement, Rupam, Rupam, Pratirupa Babhova. In and through all this multifariousness, that same thing is expressing itself. Do we get it? Do we catch hold of it? No. What's the solution? The solution is very simple. Can we live in the moment? All this notion of past and future is relevant only in this present moment. It is with this respect to this present moment that there is a future, that there is a past. But our minds keep on playing these games, and in this moment, it starts wondering, what is going to happen tomorrow? What am I going to eat at night tonight? There is this person who has been misbehaving. How am I going to treat this? Oh, but that person has been behaving very well. He or she should be rewarded. All this stuff about the future. Or start thinking about, oh, so-and-so behaved very badly with me today. Or so-and-so behaved very well with me today. Again, in the past. So, which means that this mind has a habit of running off either to the past or to the future, ignoring the one thing that is there always, namely the present moment. It is with respect to this present moment that there is time. It is with respect to this present position that there is space. And it is something that is a free gift to us all the time. It's just that we have chosen to ignore it. And this understanding that we are choosing to ignore the one thing that is most certain needs to be rectified. So what is the solution? The mind has a habit, certainly, of ignoring this and running off to the future, running off to the past. It's got this strange habit of ignoring the one thing that is immediate and taking on things which are not immediate. Yeah? Mediate. It's accustomed to thinking in terms of mediate realities, not immediate realities, immediate realities. So the solution? Training the mind to catch hold of the present moment and the present point of space. How? And this is what brings us to this one thing that Vivekananda never ceases, never tires of reminding us. All that you do, all your work, eating, sleeping, going around, everything done with full attention, full consciousness. What happens? The mind starts losing this habit of running off into the past or running off into the future. I think I've mentioned here this famous poet, mathematician, astronomer called Omar Khayyam. He had this book called Rubaiyat. There he says this: "O my beloved, fill the cup that clears today of past regrets and future fears." Past regrets and future fears. Apprehension about the future. Regrets about the past. Where is the relevance of any of that in the present moment? All these deep philosophers have somehow or the other encountered this impassable wall that the human mind comes up with as soon as it starts contemplating time or any deeper aspect of our existence. And then it says, oh, this is this wondrous thing I find no way of going beyond. The answer is simple. Just try to catch hold of the present moment. If that is done successfully, problem completely solved. It's just that what we call our mind is by nature something that is accustomed to living either in the past or in the future. But as soon as it starts receiving this training and starts deriving satisfaction from living in the moment, then these apprehensions of the future start dissolving. That is why this reality was called Abhayam. In this fear is exactly the same thing that is at the root of apprehension, of tensions. It's the same human emotion that gives rise to, oh, what is going to happen, this uncertainty. But here is a source of certainty, the present moment, the present activity, the present job. Why not focus on it and let the future take care of itself? It's basically telling the mind, don't behave in this stupid, irrational way, but forget that and focus on the job at hand. This is what Karma Yoga is about. Focusing on whatever we are doing at this moment. It's based on this knowledge. Swamiji's Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga are essentially one is the practice, the other is the conclusion. It's basically the same thing. So the solution, where all these deeper ideas, how to bring them, the answer is fairly simple. We have this awareness with us all the time. Can we try to cultivate it a little more? What is the way? Simply walk carefully. I mean, whatever, if we are walking, walk with the full mind on the walking. If you're eating, eat with the full mind on the eating. Nothing mysterious. It is actually removing this entire mystery, inquiring into this mystery. Yeah? And then the sense of wonder arises again, and you pursue and ask yourself, what is the truth in all this? And then these two things start taking over our lives. The sense of wonder coupled with this inquiry, this desire to know the truth above everything else. These two is the sum and substance of all of this. Maya on the one hand, and truth or the knowledge of the Atman or Brahman on the other. We'll resume this next time. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.